Welcome to Education for All podcast, where we explore education challenges and innovations across Africa. I'm Nitana Liro. I'm the founder of Education for All, which is an initiative that I started in July 2023 to make language learning accessible to everyone. Today's podcast episode is about transforming education in Africa. Our guest for today is Rogers Patrick Kamingusha from Rwanda. Say hi.
Hi, audience. Thank you, Natanya, for hosting me today.
Yeah, thank you so much. I am so happy to host you as well. So, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Rogers. So, Rogers is the acting head of Africa Reform Education and Educate. He spent 12 years dedicated to improving educational systems. He has pioneered and launched successful programs in Rwanda and Tanzania. He has fostered relationships with ministries of education in both Rwanda and Tanzania as well. He is now working as the country director for Educate Rwanda. He oversees external facing work, focusing on entrepreneurship, curriculum design, and also project-based assessment. He also now is leading 50 people implementing programs across Rwanda's 30 districts. He's passionate about youth development and also believes that young people need proper support and mentorship. So he's supporting them with his skills, with his expertise, and he's leading them to become entrepreneurs and leaders. I'm so happy to host you, and I'm going to be uh, directing you towards the first question. Can you tell me a little bit about yourself and what led you to work on education?
Thank you, Natanya, for a great question. And I think my, most of parts of about myself have been explained already. But I'll just say again, my name is Rogers Patrick Kamugisha. I like calling myself an East African because of the work I've done in the region of East Africa. By the way, traditionally, my is not in education. No, I'm in education. And I think one of the biggest reasons why I was influenced to join education is that education is the foundation of everything, right? And I started my career in areas of research as an economist, but I started getting information that actually education is it's the area that is still struggling when you look at different pillars that are affecting Africa, right? And of late, we see in Africa, I think education is still lacking and is still lagging behind, right? So I think for me, being in education has been a great opportunity for me to give back to the people and also work with governments, especially ministries, to reform and make education more meaningful.
Yes, well said.
You?
So, what is the biggest challenges in African education today? You've told us there are many challenges and you are trying to give back to your community. So, what are the challenges that you faced?
One of the, I think over 3 to 5 challenges that I've observed in education in Africa, ranging from access to quality. Number one is access. I think there is still limited access of education to most of the people in Africa. If you look, for example, in primary age bracket, over 32 million people have not accessed school according to the recent UNESCO report. That's number one. Number two, there's still gender disparities in education. I think I was reading a report in one of the UN reports, and I observed that for the ages between 7 and 9, right, over 9 million kids or girls have not been able to access education compared to 6 million boys who have been able to access education. So gender disparities is still cannot score the conflicts that are happening in Africa. If you look at Central and West Africa, we still have lots of conflicts. If you look at Congo, if you look at Southern Sudan, some parts in Cameroon have been affected by a lot of conflicts, and that has actually pushed away over thousands of youth and students out of school. For instance, over 14,000 people, 14,000 students, 14,000 actually schools, not even students, have been closed. because of conflicts in Africa. I think this for me, as someone who has a lot of background in someone who has stayed in Uganda, I've seen also that there's also still a challenge around financial barrier, because I think we have in Uganda there is universal education, right? But then when there's universal education in primary and secondary schools, students are still struggling when it comes to accessing materials, scholastic materials. Some parents can't actually even afford some of their students and kids to go to school because of transport barriers. So still financial barriers is still a big challenge. And then I would say the last biggest challenge for me as well evolves around um, quality. Now, for me, quality is key because we may have education, but if quality is not really greatly improved, we still have challenges. Quality is still a core thing because even we see, even when graduates have not been able to close the labor gap that are still existing, they don't have the skill set that is required for them to flourish in labor market. So I think for me, as I said, the challenges evolve around access to quality, and those are some of the really challenges that I have observed in Africa that is affecting education.
Yeah, well said. Especially nowadays, you've seen graduates and they don't have a job, and you can ask yourself, why don't they have the job? That they are educated. This comes to the fact that if there is a quality education, why can't they get a job, or is there a job shortage? So this is one thing that you have to think also, I would say.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, can you tell us a little bit about Educate? So, you've mentioned that you are at the work at Educate, and what is it about? So, how does it address the skills gap in Rwanda?
Educate is an international NGO that has been in space in education since 2008. And just to be more specific with Rwanda, I think as an organization, we exist to support reforms with focus in secondary age bracket. We exist to support governments to reform education, which would in turn change how and what teachers teach, right? So we have been doing that with Rwanda ever since they reformed the education that was rolled out in 2016. We have seen that that has been very helpful, especially when it comes to content, to how it is assessed. Because when we talk about supporting governments in how they reform education, you want to make sure that the content that you are supporting the governments improve has ability to foster 21st century skills, but also has ability to be assessed properly. Because I think traditionally we have seen that how education has been is that it's more theoretical and content based, right? So as an organization, we aim to make sure that it's actually competence based. We ensure that it's actually challenging learners to bring the aspect of lifelong learning, right? We have not only, by the way, supported reforms in education. I think from the introduction you mentioned that I've supported some work in Tanzania. We have also supported Tanzania in their efforts to reform education by working with education implementing agencies, really to ensure that they are ready to build the capacity of the teachers and that the content is very relevant. Again, as I said, we aim to support one of the innovative subjects that we believe can create employment, subjects like entrepreneurship, subjects like business studies, as a subject that we have been supporting to ensure that really it is able to solve unemployment gaps, that the students out of education or out of doing entrepreneurship can be able to create their own jobs, or they can be able to solve community problems where they are coming from, right? So as an organization, I would gladly say that we support entrepreneurship areas and support governments to reform how the assessments carried out, and we really do a lot of evidence-based and research to see if the education is actually meaningful to the schools, meaningful to the students, and if it's actually solving the problems that most youth are actually facing. So we exist really to promote entrepreneurship and leadership through education.
That's amazing. So I'm going to move to my next question. Competency-based curriculums is what you stated. You are changing the education to be a competency-based curriculum. What does it make a
Mhm.
difference, and why do you think these are important?
Wow, that's a great question. I think when I look at education, before I talk about CBC, when I look at my journey as a student from primary level to university, my mind during that time was about passing exams and going to the next stage, going to the next level. I think I felt education was created to make me get a job. Education was created to make me become a doctor, for example, become someone who's professional. That is, I think that's the mind I had. But as time went by, I would question myself. I would ask myself if actually education has transformed my life. And if I stopped, for example, in Form 6 or Senior 6, would I solve any problem? And the answer had always been no, because I think I was only passing exams. I could not solve any problem. What am I trying to say? Competence-based education is supposed to be different from the traditional education that I've been talking about. Because for me, when you look at competence-based education, its emphasis is it focuses on competencies, not content. Um, because if it focuses on competencies, then the learners are able to develop innovative skills. Learners are able to develop 21st century hard and soft skills that really enable them to enjoy education. We want our youth, we want our students, our pupils to enjoy education, right? Number two is that you want competence-based education to be learner-centered. Today, the youth have access to ICT. The youth have access to a lot of information. If education is learner-centered, which we believe CBC should be, it enables the students actually also to become teachers. The teacher should be a facilitator in a classroom. The teacher should challenge these learners to go outside and talk to people about the challenges that they are facing and how the specific theories they are getting from school or in classroom can actually enable them solve those problems they had from the community, right? You want also context-based education to, as I had said, to be very practical in terms of assessment. You want to ask questions where students can be challenged to think better, can be challenged to justify, can be challenged to create, can be challenged to design solutions, right? Can be challenged to go and solve a particular problem through projects, for example, right? A competence-based education as well should be able to bring in the element of local context. I think for me that is a core because local context is very important. And I think I don't want to go into some of the challenges that have affected CBC, but most times is that most countries that have reformed have actually failed to bring in the biggest percentage of local context. So you find that even when education has been improved, the way it is actually framed and created, it has less aspects of local context, right? And so for me, competence-based education is actually different from the traditional competence-based education. And I also want to echo and say that CBC should, for me, be able, CBC is actually competence-based education. Some countries call it skills-based education to solve 5 challenges. I hope I'll be able to get these challenges out. Number one, competence-based education should be able to address the skills gap. Because, as I said, in sub-Saharan Africa, most graduates have not been able to be consumed by the labor market. because the skills they have attained in school have not given them enough competencies to be actually consumed by the labor market. That's why you find that the labor market doesn't have the right people that are helpful. Number two, competence-based education should be able to solve unemployment gap. Unemployment gap, they should be able to go into the economy, they should be able to go into the community, create jobs, solve existing problems, right? Competence-based education as well, I think for me is very important. Should be able to foster entrepreneurial skills. Entrepreneurship skills are a key. As I said, when I was at school, you could not ask me if I attained any entrepreneurial skill. I don't think so. I did not see an education that was actually challenging me to have entrepreneurship skills. Not of late, when we started reforming education through CBC, that I can see that actually it is an important aspect. Also, competence-based education should be able to address inequalities that exist in education. Inequalities, I've talked about some of the challenges that are affected by the recent education today, and I talked about disparities, and ladies and girls have been affected greatly. And education should be inclusive. Education should be able to support all spheres, all areas, and challenges that girl child are facing, so that they can be able to go to school. And then finally, education should be able to address African Union's agenda of 2063, whose purpose is to promote sustainable socio-economic development. Because these agendas, some countries have actually not integrated them into their priorities. Even when education has been reformed, some of those agendas have not been taken into consideration. I guess CBC should be able to really address some of those challenges that I have talked about. A very important aspect that can lead to development in our countries if it is actually taken seriously.
Yes, if it is well implemented, I think it can
Yeah.
change the whole continent, the whole world, I would say. And we have to start with ourselves. And I've seen this in myself. I'm a student, and every time there's exams, you study the book and you eat it, you consume it, and when there's exam, you spit it out, and that's it. You don't remember anything from it. There's no practical thing from it. And for example, if you're learning chemistry, and let's say I want to be a chemist, and in order to be a chemist, what do? You mix chemicals, and you get a result from it. And that is what's interesting, and that's what interested you to become a chemist in the first place, right? So getting those practical skills enables us to become what we want, and also help our continent. So especially if you are a young student here, if you are interning at companies, maybe it's working by side who is like an expert, that would really help you as well. So connecting with those people, and people are the gains. If you talk to people, you get the experts that you need, you get the skills that you need. So always talk to people, always to reform to people who are better than you and can help you.
Mm.
So I'm going to move to the fifth question. So what transformative moments in your career can you share any inspiring stories that you have had?
First of all, I said professionally, I'm not an educator. Experience-wise, I'm an educator. I think for me, the biggest success in my career journey so far is the ability to move from the professional work of an economist to being in education and supporting governments to reform education. And you are part of that journey. I think number one is that being part of the journey that has transformed education in East Africa has been a great success given my background, right? Number two, I would also say that actually I have also had a chance to do a lot of work in instructional designing. Being able to design curriculums is one thing, but also being able to make it meaningful is the other thing. and the ability for me to work with different experts to design the curriculum, to design training materials, to design materials that are actually contextualized. Because as I said, working in Rwanda, working in Tanzania, those are different economies and different contexts altogether. But the ability to contextualize the education and create materials that are meaningful for me has been an important aspect. Seeing those textbooks and learning materials that have been part of in terms of supporting governments being given to the students in school has been a great success for me. I have also actually trained more than 5,000, more than 500 teachers of business studies and entrepreneurship. And in general, I have trained over 1,000 teachers that exists outside business and entrepreneurship subjects, right? That's also, I think, for me, a great success. But also, I've also been part of the journey where I speak to youth directly, right? It's for me, I like speaking to the end users. When you design reforms and you create these reforms, I think success would be when you go and speak to the youth and see what they have been able to start. Been able to be a mentor, some youth that have started their different aspects of entrepreneurship. I have actually seen what they have been able to do in their communities. I have nurtured and mentored the youth. Over 100 youth from these two countries, and even in Uganda, by the way, have got a chance to be mentored by me. I think when you reached out to me and I saw that you are a youth, I was actually excited to be to support your journey because, as I said, if you nurture a breed of youth rightfully and support their ambitions, Africa won't be the same. Africa want to be the same. I lacked this mentorship when I was at school. I didn't even get it from my parents, right? But when I started to see it, the power it has, it excites me, right? I think for me, those are some of the successes that I have registered and my work so far. And the journey is still going. The journey is still going. If you ever hear that Rogers has decided to come to Ethiopia, support whatever reforms that are ongoing. You know that I'm driven by the ambition to see Africa change because over the next 10 years, it is estimated globally that Africa is going to provide the biggest percentage in the labor market globally. So if you look at that estimate, that means that we have to do a lot in education. We have really to do a lot in education, but also to do a lot in entrepreneurship, so that at least our youth have the right skills to really be absorbed within the international labor market.
You're right. Especially if you come to Ethiopia, I'll definitely be attending any sessions or mentorships that you have. That's one thing that you have to consider. And what's an advice that you would give for young Africans to be aspiring leaders? You've talked a lot about youth, so I think this is the best question
Yeah.
that I have to ask.
I think for me, I normally say that the best time for someone to try something new is when you are a youth. And I think the youth that I'm talking about are those within school and outside school. I will start by addressing the youth that are in school. If you are a youth and you are in school, and I don't care whether it is in primary level or secondary level or university, it is time to apply those theories in real life. It is time for you to be enterprising, and it's time for you to love education. And I will tell you that enjoy the journey but not the destination. Enjoy your school life. Go back in the whole days, start up something and learn from it. That's the biggest advice I'm giving to the youth in school. Some youth who have dropped out of school for the reasons I mentioned that are affecting education and are trying to start up their businesses, are trying to start up small initiatives. Don't give up. Start small, start small, start small, learn by mistake. I think success to me is when you fail. When you fail, you know why you failed, right? So I always tell people that if you have multiple failures, it means that you tried something and you have learned from it. If you only have one failure, you are likely to go back and sleep and surrender. So people that have dropped out of school, so unfortunate, but it's not the end. Keep trying, and keep pushing. Start small, you will grow big, right? I think also the last advice I would give goes to the educators. We have lots of educators. We have teachers. Teachers do the greatest job in the world. They nurture a skill force that we want to see succeed in our economies. I want to give you a hand of applause. I want to appreciate the work you're doing. I want you to be very determined, be very current, challenge the status quo because education has changed. Our youth are not the traditional youth. They are very different today. So you should match their curiosity skills. They have been able to access a lot of information. They have parents who have given them some home or informal education. So you as an educator, you also need to upgrade your education formally or informally. But I want to appreciate the work you're doing as an educator. I think that's it that I can say as my words of encouragement as we try to round off this discussion.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I'm so glad to have you. One thing that Rogers has said, do not regret and do the things that you want to do, and also keep trying whatever the outcome is. Fail, and if you fail, try again. Yes. Thank you so much. I'm honored to have you.